Welcome to our AJA Lunchtime Live, Making Cages History with Corporate Campaigns. I'm Kimberly Carroll. I am the Director of Animal Justice Academy, and I just want to welcome all you sweet folks here that are here with us live, but also those of you who are watching the replay. While we are working towards ending animal exploitation, which is our ultimate goal for most of us here, waiting on this like glacially slow process of passing new laws and getting society to go vegan, it just doesn't feel like it's enough when billions of beings are experiencing unimaginable pain, the pain of extreme confinement in the animal agriculture industry. And that's where corporate cage-free campaigns come in. So let me introduce you to our guest today. PJ Nyman brings over a decade of experience as a professional advocate for farmed animals, including developing Canada's leading corporate benchmarking report that tracks the animal welfare performance of food companies. Prior to entering the nonprofit sector, PJ earned a master's degree in social and political thought from York University in 2011 and taught and published in social sciences. As an animal advocate, PJ has managed volunteer programs and media relations, national campaigns in the US and Canada, and led strategy and communications for corporate animal welfare reform in Canada. PJ lives in Toronto with companion cat Simon Nyman and elder bunny Blinksopoulos. PJ, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction,
Yeah.
Kimberly. It's good to see also some familiar faces to me in the audience.
Well, and PJ, I mean, I probably missed this from introducing you, but you are actually now Animal Justice's corporate campaigns manager, and that is why I have referred to you as part of our team. And I'm so happy. We've been working sort of, unofficially together, you and Animal Justice for a long time now, but to actually have you in our hands, so good. PJ is brilliant, folks. I love seeing this person just get in there and with all of these beautiful ideas and just so dedicated. So PJ, first of all, just to get anyone who might not be familiar with corporate campaign work, can you just give a little rundown, a little 101?
Yes, absolutely. So companies that we focus on when it comes to corporate campaigns are typically companies that the public directly gets food from or like knows them through that means. So it's grocery stores, restaurants, food service providers, manufacturers too, that might have like big names that we recognize at the grocery store. And these companies in particular are the intermediary between producers, like those who actually, raise animals, and the public who buys animal products or who is choosing not to. And so because of that, these companies have sourcing standards that have an impact. And so corporate campaigns really focus on what those sourcing standards are so that we try to address like some of the worst suffering in the food system and elevate the standards to just like increase the bare minimum, basically. And I can also add to this too, that part of corporate campaigns work is to elevate animal welfare as a corporate responsibility issue, because corporate responsibility is already a field that's grown like extensively in the last 10 years. So it is NGOs largely that are behind a lot of these commitments. So we already have like environmental NGOs working with companies on emissions reduction or waste reduction. These like companies don't just volunteer to do the right thing. We actually need pressure. And so this work is what ensures that animal welfare is part of that conversation and that it's something that companies have to address. And so the work is specifically trying to get companies to adopt public commitments, like public policies to adhere to a certain standard by a certain date. And that's basically the work we're doing. And then at this point, we're in a phase of the work that we would call accountability work, which is the follow through and implementation part and ensuring that companies are doing what they said they would do.
And so, so for those of folks, you probably heard the phrase ESG being floated around. That's the sort of corporate standards that they're being held to. We want it to be ESGA. Okay, we want it to be environmental, it's sustainability and governmental, and we want animals. We want that to be just as much top of mind for corporations as these other aspects. That's my personal goal, PJ. I don't know about you.
No, exactly. Like animals need to be part of that conversation, whether they're lumped into like the environmental factors or whatever category a company puts it in. Like animal welfare needs to be part of the conversation. These are the companies that are buying and selling like all of the animal products produced in any country. So it's like they have a big responsibility for how animals are raised.
Yeah, and I think we all know that corporations kind of get off a little bit easy. I mean, there's a lot of folks, a lot of Canadians who hear about the horrific conditions for farmed animals, through our investigations, and they think, never mind the companies, the government needs to do something about that. Everybody looks to the government. And at Animal Justice, we're working on both simultaneously. The legal, trying to change the laws, trying to change the corporations, also trying to change people's minds and hearts. But can you explain, why we've had to turn to corporate targets here in Canada, why this is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things. I think folks here are probably aware that we don't have federal legislation in Canada protecting animals on farms. So there's a huge gap. Our system for overseeing animal welfare standards on farms in Canada is very outdated. We don't have a dedicated minister of animal welfare. We don't have proper government oversight of standards, really. There are some provincial laws, but they're limited. They lack oversight. There's no enforcement capacity. And so there's this real gap where we don't have government oversight. And while we do want to work toward that and are working toward that, we also need ways to intervene now to impact animals that are in the food system right now. And so because of the lack of legislation, and then an additional factor too, is that industry is largely self-regulating, that because of the lack of legislation. So we have this one body in Canada, the National Farm Animal Care Council, which is mostly industry groups creating standards for themselves. And that they don't go far enough. Those standards, because they're industry led, they don't go far enough for animals, like don't even come close. And
Yeah,
so we,
and for folks here, that's also known as NFAC. So a
yeah,
lot of folks would know them as NFAC.
the
That's the
acronym, yeah.
industry group. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like
Mhm.
NFACC. That's the
Mhm.
acronym. And you can, we have a lot of materials about this actually through Animal Justice's blog to learn a little bit more about NFAC and the problems there. And so we have lack of legislation. We have industry being self-regulating. And then we also have a situation in Canada where the industries are highly consolidated. Like there are two big egg producers in the whole country. We have like the two biggest grocery stores in the country. Loblaws and Sobeys own 50% of the grocery market. So there's like a huge consolidation of industry, no standards that they have to adhere to legally in terms of on-farm practices. And so we really need a way to intervene and do things like get animals out of cages. And so we do look to companies to do this because of that intermediary position I mentioned before, and also because companies have brand recognition to the public. They have to manage business risk around their image. They're accountable to consumers and their investors, so they're at least somewhat responsive to public opinion. And then another thing that is relevant too for having corporate animal welfare commitments is that they set a precedent for support for legislation. So they offer more public support because the issue's been elevated through campaigns, advertising, various public awareness initiatives that go with corporate campaigns, elevate the issue to the public, create that kind of support, or at least help create that kind of support. And then also the corporate commitments create a clear market. So in the US, for example, in states that have cage-free laws, corporate commitments were cited as reasons why these laws could be enacted and be okay for folks, kind of thing. So what I mean is that industry was able to support cage-free laws they otherwise wouldn't because they knew that their customers, these companies, wanted to buy a higher welfare product. So that like those commitments actually create this precedent for legislation, for more public support, which can get us farther than the commitments do on their own. So they're a really important stepping stone.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just, for those of you who are working on corporate campaigns, just again, just to take, and I know this is on the legal side of things, but just to remember, there are no laws, no federal laws governing or overseeing farming on farms, farmed animals on farms. There are none. Okay. Any standards there are, they are not they're not laws, and they are created by an industry group. Okay, so obviously we're not being able to look at the law to take care of pushing change for these animals, and so that's why we're having to go in this direction as well. So PJ, Animal justice, we just got into doing corporate campaign work about 3 or so years ago, because it was a piece of the animal advocacy puzzle that was just really lacking in Canada. We were hearing this from across the globe. I mean, it was basically you, PJ from Mercy for Animals, against the entire country's retailers. So why do you think it was so important for animal justice to get into corporate campaigns at that juncture and at this juncture?
Yeah, so I worked with Mercy for Animals for about 4 years prior to coming to Animal Justice this year. And in my role, I was in like a sort of friendly corporate relations role. So it was like, I mean, me against the companies. It was like me being like, "Hey, so about those policies you adopted, like what are you doing about them?" Like it was friendly for the most part for a few years of really following up, developing relationships with companies, understanding like what they've done well, what they haven't done, and working with them to make progress. And so it was in that time I helped develop an annual benchmarking report with Mercy for Animals, the Canada Animal Welfare Scorecard. I'm referencing that because that project is really what made me so aware of what the issues are and how we could make more progress here on particular animal welfare reforms. So in that time that I was working with companies, we did get them to be more transparent. Not all of them, but many. We saw like a significant increase in companies reporting on animal welfare. We had several companies add animal welfare to their annual reports where they hadn't before. They started to be transparent, like actually publish percentages of what percentage of their egg sales are from, caged hens versus cage-free facilities. And so these were like good incremental changes. But what we didn't see were new goals, were them saying like, we will reduce cage use by this much by this year, even when they had commitments to do it to 100% in the long run. And so we needed to see more progress. We could only get so far with this kind of friendly dialogue. I even had one company tell me, pretty big company, tell me that a campaign would help them, that team, push forward their policy internally. So sometimes the folks we talk to at companies are actually the very progressive people in the company who want to see the change, but they're in this middle position between us, the NGOs bringing the issue, and the business who wants to save money and, has their bottom line. And so it was clear that we needed to have more public pressure. And that's where animal justice really came in. It was like animal justice positioned so well as like this powerful advocacy organization all across Canada, has this network here with the AJA group, and also other work like work on legislation that's very complementary with corporate campaigns. So that's where the animal justice got involved. And then I like to talk about that history with companies and the frustration of it being like my villain origin story. And now I'm here as the corporate campaigner at Animal Justice, where yes, some of the role is to have relationships. Like I think that's still useful, but also it's very clear that companies are not doing enough. And it's very clear that public campaigns are needed and that they will not do enough unless all of us collectively start to show them why they need to and continually push them on it as far as we can.
Yeah, we tried to play nice. We tried, but yeah. And again, our campaigns at Animal Justice are, they're professional, they're effective, they're not hate mongering, but they're like, dudes, running out of time here. No more screwing around. If I can say it in a non-professional way. PJ, let's talk about the extreme confinement that we've documented every time we take a camera into a farm in this country. Give us a little sort of rundown.
So one thing I'll start with here is that I actually have experience being on egg farms in a variety of facilities. I came to doing animal protection work at a large farmed animal sanctuary in the US and California, where we did legal large-scale rescues of hens from egg farms. So I got to experience conditions in conventional battery cage farms, enriched or furnished cage barns, and then also free range or cage-free facilities, and could really see firsthand just the differences in the conditions of the animals, and then also what it was like as a person to walk into these facilities and experience that for ourselves. And so it's awful. That's very obvious. But in particular, I think what's important to note that stands out to me the most is that animals are spending their entire lives in these facilities. And so every undercover investigation of an egg farm is showing the same thing, like animals that look despondent, like in pain. Some have, died and they're just left in the barn with their cage mates next to them for days and days. They are subject to all kinds of diseases because of their breeding for rapid egg production. So they have, osteoporosis, they have like bone issues, they have respiratory illness because of concentrations of ammonia. It's like every welfare issue you could imagine is there when it comes to a hen in a cage. And so in addition to having like all those welfare issues around it, we also have very few differences between cage systems. So there's like people, I think, in the industry will focus a lot on the cruelty and battery cages, conventional cages. This is what's been most known, but kind of overlook the issues with just cages broadly speaking. And that's why I wanted to emphasize at the beginning, just thinking about like spending their entire lives in cages. And there's actually an interesting study. So I'm not sure if folks have heard of this project called the Welfare Footprint Project, but it's like a research group that's trying to create something like a carbon footprint, but for animal welfare. So companies could have a sense of like what kind of impact they have based on their policies. And they found some really interesting stats on pain experiences. And I'll just cite this because I think it's interesting. It's not something that gets talked about that much. Which is that hens in like the best of the best cages, so furnished cages, will experience almost 5,500 more hours of pain in their lifetimes compared to hens that are in cage-free facilities. And so it's like 5,500 hours of pain, right? So it's really important to think about this and also to realize that every undercover investigation of an egg farm in Canada for the last 10 years has shown the same thing. Even though there are many companies committed to doing better, and there are some facilities that have made improvements, like by and large, the egg industry is not changing. And that's, obviously a big problem, which hence doing corporate campaigns. But that's some of it. I could talk more about specific welfare issues, but I think that gives like a good overview of the problem that we're looking at. And also what undercover investigations show and continue to show. And I can also say a little preview that we do have more coming. And I think these will be really impactful and will play a big role in our upcoming corporate campaigns.
Yeah, and PJ, I have seen some of these studies like with the sort of ratings of pain, and like I can't remember but I think it's extreme pain or unbearable pain or whatever, and everything, and chickens in cages, like egg-laying chickens in cages, are being subjected to the most excruciating pain,
Exactly.
psychological
Yeah.
and physical pain.
It is. Yeah. The stat, I have it in front of me, is like that in terms of hens in hens who are not in cages have like a 63% reduction in disabling pain, and then like a 57% reduction in hurtful pain, a 70% reduction in annoying pain. So the study was really interesting because it broke down the different kinds of suffering and levels. And I think that does a lot to really give a like visceral sense of why these kinds of reforms make a really big difference for animals in these systems.
Excellent. Is that one of the links you gave us, PJ?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Welfare Footprint Project link
Okay.
should be there for
Okay.
folks.
Okay, great. So Nevis, maybe you can drop that in specifically right
Oh
now for
yeah,
folks to check out.
I see it there. It's like the second last one that was in
Okay.
Nevis's comment.
Yeah, the second last one, the welfare blaying hens. Okay.
Yeah, and then there's another study there that talks about mortality. I can mention this too, actually, because it's a common like pushback point we get. So early on, when farmers started to transition to cage-free systems and they didn't know what they were doing, and so there weren't good management practices, there was an increase in mortality in some cases. And so industry like continues to try to put this out there as though it means like there's just trade-offs for either system. That's not true. Both because it's not just an equal trade-off situation, and also because as cage-free farming has developed, mortality's declined. So there's actually a 4 to 6% decline in mortality for cage-free systems over 10 years. So that's already been like studied now. And so that's the other link there.
Okay, thank you. That's important because that is something I hear. I hear from some very seasoned activists about how, oh, it's actually worse for animal welfare. So thank you for, and we'll, Nevis, if you can maybe put that link in as well, that would be great. So, okay, before we go, well, actually, well, let's talk about the urgency of cage free. Now, obviously, the extreme confinement that we're talking about here is also a huge issue with pigs, with pigs that are bred in gestation crates. Some of the worst forms of confinement there, where they spend almost their entire lives in a metal cage where they can't even turn around or lie down comfortably. We also have baby cows kept in veal crates, you know, separated, isolated, or veal hutches. So there are some, we'll say, the most egregious forms of animal suffering for farmed animals. And I'd actually argue for suffering on this planet. But let's talk about why we have really been focusing on the cage-free commitments, getting retailers to make cage-free commitments. Tell us some of the aspects of the urgency of this issue and in Canada specifically right now.
Yeah, so first of all, the reason why groups started to focus on NGOs around the world, started to focus on intervening when it comes to confinement is because of calculating the most intense and long amount of suffering for a species or for an industry. And so cages became a focus because egg-laying hens on egg farms spend 1.5 to 2.5 years in those cages. And so the duration and then intensity of suffering is very high. And there's scientists who study like the metrics of suffering to actually calculate what is causing the most and what interventions from animal advocates could have the most sort of immediate impact on animals' well-being. And so that's where confinement issues have really been the center, because of those causing the most, most suffering. And in Canada in particular, we have like 25 to 35 million laying hens in the country every year. And undercover investigations led to a lot of corporate commitments. We saw, we have 130 big companies in Canada committed to going cage free. They committed between 2015 and 2018 largely. Most of the deadlines for those commitments are 2025. So that's the year we are in, hence the urgency over the last few years. And in particular, why we are at a very critical moment for this is that the industry in Canada is not going cage free. They're not like doing that on their own because they know that the public opposes cages. And also, so this is relevant, 80% of Canadians oppose cages. And that's like a super majority. There's not a lot of issues that the public agrees on at that scale. So this is really important. It's like a major majority support issue is like, we don't like confinement. It's common sense. And then the science supports it. Like keeping animals in cages is cruel. But what the industry has been doing in Canada as a response to the original public opposition to cages is to try to make them a little bigger. So we have now investment from industry in what they call enriched cages or furnished cages, where they're investing and transitioning farms and barns to get away from conventional battery cages, but replacing them with slightly bigger ones. And these new cages take hens from having, I think, one standard piece of paper size per hen to one legal sheet of paper size per hen, like amount of space. It's such a minimal difference. They might add an object in the box that a hen can interact with. Unclear if they really do that. And the scale of this move to enrich cages is pretty startling. So the stat is this: from 2019 to 2024, I don't have a link for this. This is like from an industry report, but just so everyone knows, it's from the Egg Farmers of Canada annual report. From 2019 to 2024, cage-free production in Canada grew by 4%. It went from like 16% to 20. And by grow, I don't mean like it got bigger. I mean, it takes up a bigger percentage of the total of egg production in Canada. So cage-free went from 16 to 20%. That same amount of time, from 2019 to 2024, enriched cage production went from 18 to 36%. So enriched cage production doubled and is now over a third of the entire industry. And so at this pace, what we're seeing is industry is investing in like systems that have like a 25-year lifespan. that are just more cages. And so we're at this point and where we're really at a risk of cages becoming entrenched in Canada. And companies in particular are at risk of defaulting on their public commitments. And some of these commitments, like they share with their investors, they've marketed off of them. And so it's really a business risk that they're defaulting. And interestingly, this is like last thing I'll say on this is global NGOs have come to us in Canada, those of us working with companies here, asking what's going on because global NGOs are working with global companies like Costco, Kraft Heinz is another example, and they can't fulfill their cage-free commitments here. Like they're going, Costco, for example, is cage-free in Mexico. They're cage-free in the United States. And in Canada, they've been reporting 23% cage-free for like 6 years in a row. So the holdup in Canada is like pretty significant. It has to do with a combination of factors like the lack of legislation, the consolidation of the industry, and some other things. But really what we're seeing here is this risk of cages being entrenched here in a way that will be much more difficult for us to undo in another 5 or 10 years. So this is the moment. We have to intervene now. And I can also add that it's a global issue. We have animal justice part of the Open Wing Alliance, which is a global coalition of over 80 member organizations working on this. So we're not alone. We have a ton of support for this. And everybody is very aware, like this is the time, this is the deadline year, and we need to go all in and campaign until we win.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're talking about at this point, when you talk about the 5,500 hours of disabling pain that going cage free saves an animal, we're talking about billions upon billions of saved hours of that disabling pain here if we can make this change. So PJ, before we go any further, I think it's important to address some of the concerns about corporate and incremental campaigns that come up for a lot of folks in the animal advocacy movement. Many of us here, including you and me, we ultimately want to see animals free. We don't want to see animals exploited for any reason. So the idea of a cage-free campaign might seem to some like we're condoning animal farming as long as it's done right. And some feel that incremental campaigns can even hurt the movement. And I think it's really important for us as animal advocates to always be asking these questions, always examining and re-examining the best strategies. So can you talk, I mean, you've given us a lot of reasons already, but can you talk a little bit more about the reasons why animal rights activists should feel good about cage-free campaigns, about working on cage-free campaigns?
Sure, yeah. And I can also say like you don't have to feel good about it. You could be neutral or like,
Yeah.
like it's I think there's reasons to support, but it could also be like not something you want to get involved in. Like I think it is important to kind of think about like where our hearts are, what we feel comfortable doing, what feels authentic, what matches our personalities and our skills, which to me does support us doing absolutely everything, every kind of activism, including this. And so a few of the reasons in particular, I think why these campaigns are very valuable for our shared long-term goals. First of all, animal welfare otherwise is not something that food companies will address. So if I have the opportunity to meet with Sobeys, I don't really have the option to get them to do something like not sell eggs. They're not going, that's a non-starter for companies like that. So what I can do though is say like, what's one intervention that they could do to actually have a big impact on animals in their supply chain? And the science shows us that would be banning cages in particular. So we're basically being very pragmatic in this, offering something that is achievable, but is still something the company otherwise wouldn't do. And then importantly, we're making sure animal welfare is part of a company's sustainability work that they're already doing anyway. They already have goals related to, emissions reductions or waste reduction, like I mentioned earlier, among others. And so I see our job as animal advocates or for some of us to make sure animal welfare is also in there. And that also raises public awareness about the issue because you have companies having to address animal welfare, even a company having to realize that they have a stake in how animals are raised is already a change from where they might be before we raise this. So I see it as like we are elevating it to the company, and then there's also a way that this elevates the issue to the public. So like societies with higher welfare also tend to have higher rates of meat reducers and veganism. Like they go together. There's like this overall sense of progress toward more and more consideration of farmed animals. And my like understanding of behavior change research is that incremental change toward increasing our societal concern for animals leads to overall more reduction and more consideration. So each thing we do makes people more likely to do the next thing, right? So it opens the door to for concern for animals to think about other animal issues. And then the other thing I'll say too is that we have major public support for animal welfare reform. And that is significant because we can use that for institutional change. We don't have as big a majority support for more liberation messages. We have some, but for things like, do you think hens should be kept in cages for their lives? It's like, no, everybody agrees we should be more humane, right? So that there is like something we can do with that. And these kinds of campaigns are something we can do to kind of like rally that public support towards a tangible change. And then in addition to that, and this matters to me a lot personally, having been on egg farms, is the reduction of suffering. It matters to the individual animals. It to me reminds me of stopping to give water to pigs on trucks. Like it matters to those animals to do it. And it matters that people see people caring to do that. You know, it's the act itself matters for the animal. I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. And then also the impact of others seeing the care and that concern allows them to do the same. So there's really a real impact on those animals while we also, of course, work toward longer term aims at the same time.
Mhm.
And I think also another thing to note is that companies will sometimes use cage-free commitments to reduce their egg purchasing. So we have some examples of this now, like Dairy Queen in Canada. I was following up them for years. They had a cage-free commitment. They have some egg products in things that they sell. And they decided to reformulate some of their products so that they could meet their cage-free commitment sooner, so that they actually remove eggs as ingredients, so that their overall cage-free purchasing is a higher percentage of the total because they reduced the total, right? So this Kellogg's did the same thing. Manufacturers are doing it. So there's really like these things happen. And then the other thing I'll note too is the companies that we have done the most with around like animal welfare pressure also offer the most plant-based options now. So really interestingly, Loblaws and Sobeys are the two big grocery retailers in Canada that have had like the most public pressure on animal welfare over the last 5 years. They now have the most plant-based products of their private label store brand stuff of any of the big grocery stores. So these things do tend to go hand in hand, which I think is important.
Yeah, thank you, PJ, because this as animal advocates, we have a lot on our plate. It's everybody has to choose what's right for them, but and I think it's a really important thing to remember that all successful social justice movements have had different approaches, different incremental versus more radical, and how they've needed each other to really make impact. So, okay, let's get into what we're doing and how you can be involved. So we have a huge corporate campaign we're working on, and PJ, if you can run through a little bit about it and the role that folks here and in the wider community that are going to be watching this can play.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple years ago, folks probably know, we did a campaign that was focused on Loblaws, the biggest retailer in Canada. Loblaws is a pretty controversial company. There's a lot of reasons why people don't like them. They're in the media a lot, but the animal issue hasn't really like broken through. However, Sobeys, the second largest retailer in Canada, they own 20% of the entire grocery market. Sobeys tends to have pretty positive press. They have other like progressive commitments. They are one of the big companies that kept their DEI commitments, for example, despite some like pressure to remove those, like some other companies have been doing these days. So they have a lot of good things going for them. They've been a leader before. They've had the strongest animal welfare commitment language of any of the retailers for a few years, but they've not made progress on their cage-free commitment. And so this is an area where there's a real opportunity for us to hold them accountable. They've been a leader. They have a sustainability team. I've met with them for the past 5 years, a number of different people from that team, and they have made a lot of promises to do better. They've published statements as recently as last summer. They published a statement that was endorsed by their CEO that said that renewed their cage-free commitment and talked about publishing new goals soon, which still haven't come. So Sobeys is the focus of our public campaign. Some of you might be aware Mercy for Animals has been running a campaign focused on Sobeys for a few months now, and we are about to go a lot bigger with all of us together. So what we're doing is launching actually several different campaign threads in the coming months, because this is the campaign that we are planning to do until we win. And so this is just the beginning. The company's already had a lot of pressure, but for us, this is the beginning of the public launch. And what we're doing is a few different areas of campaigning. The first is something we just launched yesterday. This is a sort of silly appeal to their CEO. This is a sort of soft launch of something that is asking their CEO to be a hero for hens. We created a cute graphic of their CEO as a superhero. I will be delivering his cape to him at their headquarters, along with a secret mission for him to make the company go cage free. And basically what we're trying to do is have a lot of people contacting the CEO in order to show him that there's a lot of support. And also importantly, the CEO is going to retire in a year. So this is his opportunity to leave a legacy of compassion. So that's our first thing. To support that, we have a lot of on the ground actions that are coming up. We have a few that Nevis can talk about. Next weekend on August 2nd, we have demos. And then we have more coming up in Toronto. And then in addition to that, we also have some investigations coming up for release. So that's something I can't talk about more at this time, but we will be certain to let everybody know. And we're going to have some new ways for people to get involved and share those new materials. And then lastly, I'll say we also want to reach egg consumers. So I think there's many of us here who don't eat eggs, but the majority of Canadians still do. And so we do need to reach them. And so we're going to be launching some public awareness initiatives really aimed at egg consumers to make them more aware of the conditions behind the eggs they're buying, and also really calling out that they're paying premium prices for factory farmed eggs. And egg prices have been a really big concern, and they're in the media a lot. But I don't think most Canadians realize that, like, as egg prices have increased, the conditions haven't gotten better for animals. So it's something that we will be working to expose. And I think I can pause there and then turn it over to Nevis to introduce.
Yeah, let's get Nevis up here on Spotlight. Nevis, can you spotlight yourself? She's running tech today, so I'm gonna see how versatile you can be there. So, folks, a lot of you know Nevis by now. Nevis Illich is our mobilization manager here at Animal Justice. Has been taking over a lot of the work around Animal Justice Academy and the community, and will be leading the charge with our newly branded mobilization group. Don't worry, I'm still here. We're still going to be doing events. You're still going to see plenty of me. But you know, Nevis is going to be your leader on the ground. And so Nevis, tell us a little bit more about this protest, and also just tell us a bit more about our mobilization leads.
Yeah, so I'll start off with the demonstrations we have planned. August 2nd is our big day. We have 4 cities across Canada that are taking charge and essentially going to have on the ground demonstrations, and they're run by our mobilization leads that I will introduce in a second. But essentially what we're doing is we're going to be protesting Sobeys, and we're going to be doing it very peacefully, because a part of our tactic is actually trying to get their customers to empathize with what these hens go through every day. So we're going to have a Brave the Cage challenge at this demonstration with an actual cage for people to enter. And we're going to be able to fit 2, maybe 3 folks in there if we really want to give them that cramped experience.
And we're offering money to do this.
Yes, we're going to be paying them $20 to spend 5 minutes in that cage. And then we're going to be asking them about how that felt and about their experience, and if they could really imagine, you know, a lifetime within that kind of circumstance. We're also going to have a banner, a whole bunch of posters. Everything is provided. All you have to do is bring yourself, maybe bring a friend or a family member, and join us for an hour. It's not very long. The cities that are taking part are Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, and Calgary. And we're really excited about this. We have a bunch of folks already RSVP'd, and we really want to show Sobeys and the public that people care about this issue, right? That people care about the hens that are being subjected to this cruelty for eggs. And all of this could not be done without our amazing mobilization leads, and we have them with us here today. So To give you the lowdown on our mobilization leads, we have over 10 leads right now across Canada. But we have 3 specifically here today who are taking the lead in organizing these specific demonstrations. First one is Michelle Oberg. Michelle is our lead in Calgary. We also have Rachel Therian. Rachel is our lead in Montreal. And Becky Radmore, she is our lead in Ottawa. So they're going to be there on the day of, on the ground, organizing everything. They're going to be bringing all of those props, everything from the cages to leaflets, protests, the banner, all that good stuff. They'll be there to answer any questions that you might have the day of. And of course, we're going to have a Toronto demo as well that's going to be run by PJ. So if you want to meet PJ in person, go spend the lunch hour with PJ outside of Sobeys, because it's going to be really important to get as many folks out there as possible. We are also contacting media for these demonstrations, right? We really want to make sure that we get as much of a spotlight on this issue as possible.
Wonderful. Michelle and Rachel and Becky, you want to just say hi? Just so these are really wonderful people, folks. So you're going to be in good hands with them. Hello, Michelle from Calgary.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I see Neil is here from Calgary, so welcome, Neil. Yeah, I really look forward to having the event. I hope that I can get a crew of animal advocates out in Calgary to help out, and let's make a big impact. I think this is a really great campaign, and I'm happy to be involved. I got really emotional, PJ, while you were talking about the hens and the suffering. This has my heart, and so I appreciate everything that you're doing on this campaign and the entire animal justice team, and I'm just happy to be a small part. Thank you,
Michelle. Rachel, you want to say hi to your folks here?
Yes, hi. So I'm from Montreal. First language is French. And it's funny because while we were speaking, I just received a banner in the mail right now.
Nice.
So we're very ready here for the event in Montreal. Looking forward for it.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Rachel. That's awesome. And we get the banner out, reveal it. No, I'm just kidding. You don't need to do that. Becky, Becky, how about you? How do you want to say hi?
Hi, nice to meet you, everyone. I'm feeling really hopeful about this. And as someone mentioned in the comments, like we already have the vegans on our side, and I'm excited to be reaching out to the non-vegans and just help them care about animals.
Amazing. Thank you, Becky. Oh my gosh, like look at the hearts here, right? And so Tracy was saying, what about Winnipeg? We are building our network out. Winnipeg is definitely going to be one of our cities. We don't have a plan for an on the ground, but you know what? Tracy's volunteering to do one, Neva. So maybe I'll hook you up with Tracy, okay? Amazing.
With help from Debbie and others, hopefully.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Otherwise,
exactly.
I'm driving to Calgary.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. Amazing. All right. Well, I'm going to, Nevis, you can take folks off spotlight, and we'll come back to PJ. Thank you so much to our first mobilization leads, and to Nevis for leading the charge on this. This is going to be exciting. A little moment in history, folks. Okay. So PJ, how does it feel like seeing the mobilization leads, like feeling like they're fired up and excited? What's that like for you?
It's great. It's really so exciting, because really like a lot of the work I'd done with companies to start was solo, like because I was like in a relations role talking to just the companies. And so like and obviously knowing the polls on public opinion and that people care about this, but having a group now to do this, like this is going to be the game changer. Like I really genuinely believe that, because we have been building up to this moment for the last couple of years. We've tried a few different campaigns. We've done some on the ground actions, but between like all of us now prepared to do this, like we are in a completely new phase of this. And we're also in a position now where this is it. Like we're campaigning to win. We're not like we try things out, but still like we're going until we do it. I also wanted to mention too that like all this organization is what lets us translate the public support of these things to the companies, because one person, one organization talking to them doesn't really show how much public support there is, but having all of you lead and show up like really does. So thank you, everyone. I feel really inspired and just so grateful.
I love it. And that's one of the things we didn't talk about with sort of the cage-free campaigns is it is such a great, it's one of the gateway drugs, right? For future animal advocates. It's a place where like 80% of Canadians can agree. If we can get them engaged, as soon as people get engaged in any kind of animal advocacy campaign, they can't help but stay and grow as animal advocates. So this is a really great campaign to get people that you know that are not vegan, are not already activists involved. It's really accessible for people. And the other thing I was just going to say, PJ, on a sort of a personal note, I'm going to take this back even earlier than your few years, because I was part of the original investigations in like 2012, 2013, 2014 through Mercy for Animals Canada. I was one of the founding members, and I remember very precisely us putting out these investigations, and it caused such a big stir. And we had the top retailers in Canada, Sobeys, Loblaws, Walmart, I'm trying to think, Metro, we had them agree to these huge cage-free commitments. And they were going to do it. And what happened, of course, of different changing landscapes of organizations, there was nobody to keep them accountable for a few years. And so we're back, and we're going to continue that work that we started way back in 2012, and we're going to finish it. How about it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's do it.
That perspective is helpful. Like, this has been like an over decade-long project, and there has been enough progress, I think, to show us this is possible, but not enough for us to even come close to stopping. So like, I'm with you on this.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to take you off spotlight, PJ, and I'm going to take myself off of spotlight, and we're going to come back to the gallery view. And I just want you to see the folks here, and folks, put your cameras on if you can, back on if you can, because we just want to say a big thank you to PJ for all of your work that you've been doing, PJ. Just incredible. Let's give an AJ thank you to PJ. PJ, you're truly brilliant. I love having you on the team. And man, I wish we could just like clone you. And put you everywhere. Same with Nevis. I actually want to clone Nevis as well. So anybody who's got a little like lead on some cloning methods, get in touch with me. Let's take everybody off of their mute, folks. If you know how to do that, Nevis. If you can take folks off of mute, and if you can undo your microphone, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to hear you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming, and have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
August 2nd, okay?
Keep up the good work.
Okay, bye everybody. Thanks,
Take
PJ.
care.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Organizers.
Keep your eyes open for all the actions around Sobeys. Take part, and no matter what it is. Thank you.